Hey YouTube, TechSparrow here with another simple API example video. And today we are going to be making a call to the ShutterStock API using the Python programming language and the requests library. So when we think about making a call to an API like this, we're going to have to do a couple of things. And the first thing is registering our app with the resource provider, that being ShutterStock here. And then that will lead into the second step, which is kind of collecting all the information that we're going to need for our app. That'll be our credentials and the MPI endpoints. The API endpoints. Some notable ones would be the authorization endpoint and then the token exchange endpoint. So let's get started. You'll need a regular user account with Shutterstock. I'm not going to show you that part. It's pretty easy. And I've already logged in, as you can see here. So you're going to want to log in and then click on your profile here and then click on your profile photo again. That brings you to the landing page for your account. On the left side, you drill down here, you'll see that there's a menu option for developers. When you click on that, it'll give you this message here about creating a new app here. So creating, registering, same idea in principle here. So let's just go ahead and do that. Okay, we got a really basic form to fill out here. So TechSparrow programs, give it a name. Simple API. The callback URL. So the OAuth 2 process works by having an outside user verify their identity with Shutterstock, basically like through you. And once they do that, Shutterstock will use this callback URL or the redirect URL to send the user to, a place that we need them to be. And they'll add some information into the redirect or the callback URL. One of them being the authorization code. And that's an important part of the OAuth 2 workflow. So we need to give them a callback URL. This can be basically anything for these very simple examples. And I've built a very simple static website that just kind of serves as this callback site function for these simple APIs. If any of that did not make any sense to you, don't worry. When we actually run the program and go through the process, you'll be able to see exactly why you need that callback URL. Okay, so anyways, let me get my thing down here. HTTPS TechSparrow programs dot GitHub websites. Okay. They have some funky field validation here. Sorry, I might have forgotten about that. Is that good? Yep, there we go. And again, this video, we're trying to keep the example as simple as possible, so we're not going to use refer. Side note, the Shutterstock API is like super cool. I haven't even had enough time to go into it and all, but they got some pretty cool stuff here. I'm probably going to make a few follow-up videos and play around with these things here. And you can see here's a company name thing. So yes, there is a pricing structure to their API, but they do have a free tier and it's not completely garbage. It's like totally usable for, making some examples, maybe even building something on a very small scale, but it's a usable free tier. So, but they do have like things like company name, kind of freaked me out when I was first looking into this, but there's a free tier. So nothing to worry there. TechSparrow program. So just fill in some stuff. Let's save some time by copying my site name here. And intended use, we'll say, personal academic hackathon. And, oh, it still didn't like that. I bet you it's this. They just want the main site. Yep. Okay, description, and this is a YouTube example video for everyone. Great. We're going to accept the terms of service and save. Okay, it's telling us the app was created successfully. They're giving us a link to the API documentation. Again, that's this thing here. Very good documentation. I mean, almost don't need this video. They have code examples and everything, and I think they cover everything pretty well. And then this free API subscription thing, I still need to really go and understand that, but let's move on, right? Okay, so here's our registered app details page. And these are the informations that I was alluding to earlier. The consumer key or our client key, the consumer secret, and they even give you a token. So in the normal workflow, you have the user like kick off an action with your application. They go verify their identity. They'll be redirected. You grab that auth code, you put it into another request, or your first request actually, to the token exchange endpoint. You exchange that for the token, and then you put that token into your request, and then you can start making requests to the protected endpoints on behalf of the user. However, if you have a use case where you don't have the user involved at all, like you just need it for internal uses, they give you that token right here. So when we get to coding, I'm going to show you how to use the token just flat out without having to go through the OAuth 2 workflow. And then we're going to go back and do the normal workflow because, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I would imagine that most use cases use this, but maybe not. I don't know. So yeah, I think that wraps up this section for registering the app and getting the information. I mean, yeah, we didn't get those endpoints yet, but I think I'll just go ahead and grab them on the fly when we start coding. It's just like not interesting for you to see me copy and paste stuff from the documentation. So I will spare you that. Thank you for your patience. We are finally ready to code. So without further ado, please open up your favorite IDE. I will be using Visual Studio Code here. And then go ahead and create yourself a project directory as I have done here. And add these three files to it. A .getignore file, a .env file, and then our run file. Simple-api-shutter.py. Great. So what we're going to be doing for the next minute or two is setting up our workspace. It's not going to be any coding. This is just getting our tools and our toolbox and all that stuff kind of in line. This project, we're going to be using a virtual environment to keep all of our installations localized to this project directory and not affected by anything globally or outside of it. And also because we are messing around with, client secret and token, this is all sensitive information that you generally don't want to, you most definitely don't want to save directly into a file. And we're going to be using environment variables to kind of separate the two. So great, that explanation is done. So getignore, we want to ignore our virtual environment directory. And then we're going to be putting our secrets somewhere in that environment file there. So we want getignore to ignore that as well, or git to ignore it as well, in case you don't want to accidentally commit that stuff. So that's it for that file. Go ahead and save it off. And we're now at a point where we can get our virtual environment set up. So open up a terminal. Doesn't have to be in your IDE. It can be, just regular old plain Jane terminal. Make sure you're in the right directory though. I like to do that. PWD does that. And now to create the virtual environment, you use Python for that. There's a module, Python 3-m venv, and then again venv. And you will see that it has finished installing. We got a project directory here. This is where all our libraries are going to be installed. And that's weird. Normally VS Code kind of pops up here and says, hey, I noticed you installed a virtual environment. Do you want me to use it? So if it doesn't do that, you can confirm that by opening up your command palette. I mean, at least in Visual Studio Code. And look at that. It's right up top there. You want to search for this Python select interpreter. And basically you're telling, oh, it looks, I can't tell if that's selected or not. It says recommended and it's dark blue. But anyways, you can see like this is your global installation of Python. And this is the one that we just created with our virtual environment. So we say, yes, that's what we want. We want you to, when we run and when we code, we want you to use the stuff that's installed here. Okay, so we're not ready to install yet because we have to activate our virtual environment. And to do that, the command is source. And then you pass that command the path to an activate script. So that's venv bin, and then the activate script. Go ahead and hit enter. There you go. See, everything went well because our terminal prompt is prepended with our directory name there. Now I'm going to be using pip3 to make the installation. So type in pip3 install requests, and then again we need the requests-oauthlib. And then the library that's going to be helping us with the environment variables is called python-env. Nice. Okay. Looks like everything installed well. I always like to do a quick pip freeze. Shows you everything that's installed. You can see .env, requests, and our requests-oauthlib. Great. So that basically wraps up our workspace setup. We're going to be ready to move on to the real coding now. Okay, so let's start with the .env file. So we know that we were given 3 pieces of information: the client ID, the client secret, or I should say 3 pieces of sensitive information, and then the token. We're going to go ahead and copy that information all in one shot. Notepad here. Okay, copy the client key, our client secret, and then our token. Oh, that's right. Yeah, so they're going to ask us for the scope here. We just need the very basic one, but if you're interested or trying to figure out which ones you need, you're going to find all that here in the documentation. When you look at the endpoints that you're trying to hit, generally they tell you these are the scopes required. So hit continue, and then they're actually putting us through our own authorization cycle here. And they generate a token. So we're going to copy that, put that on our little notepad. Okay, super. We can go back to VS Code. And then I will bring my little notepad over again. I don't know. Maybe I'm reaching around my elbow to touch my nose here, but makes sense when I'm messing around with OBS. So just paste all that good stuff here. No quotes, no spaces. Yep. There we go. Cool. Save that off. And now we're ready to get to the run file now. So at the top of our run file, we're going to do a couple of imports. So from the requests-oauthlib, we want to import the OAuth2 session object. So this is basically a requests session object, but it's an extension of it that has a whole lot of OAuth2 features that are good. Okay, and then for our environment variables, to get access to them, we need to use the .env library and import the load.env method. And then we'll also be using the OS library. So before we move any further, let's expose all those values in the env file by simply calling the load.env method. Now we can start setting up the variables that our program is going to need. We need a client ID. We're also going to need our client secret. And we're going to need that token because we're going to be doing the two examples, right? We'll start with the token one, but I figure we just load up everything up front. So to get those informations from that from your environment now, use the OS library, and it has a method called getEnv, and you simply pass it the corresponding key to the value that you're looking for. So in this case, it's client underscore ID. And the same here, get env client secret. And then finally for our token, it's the same thing. Oop, get end. No, let's try it. Get env. And we pass it token. Wonderful. So now that that's all set up, and we're going to be using the token route, so it's a little bit faster, we need to set up our request for our protected endpoint. So to do that, I went digging around in the documentation and found something that we could use. It's very simple. So you just go to their documentation page, kind of roll down here near the bottom, see these assets API. I think this is basically a lot of the more simpler things here. Click on images. And then this is the very top one. This is what we're going to use. V2 images search. So here you can even see with the example here, like what the entire API call is going to look like. And we're going to grab that. That's what we want. We'll copy that. And then, as you can even see here in the example, we're basically just going to copy this whole example here. But this API wants you to send it parameters in your request to make the search. And they have all different kinds of ways you can search. By category, color, contributor, and then, and if you read all this, it basically says, you know, if you're doing more than one, they'll just append an and to it, basically in their, on their end of the search engine. So we got this. I already have these things copied on another clipboard, so we can move back to VS Code now. And we'll call this our search endpoint URL. String, boom, there we go. And then let's build that query parameters, right? So in Python, we're going to be making them as a dictionary. And again, I'm sorry, don't need to really type it out. I already got copied over here. But as you can see, these are basically, these are the same search criteria keys given in the example. I just changed the city just for the heck of it. And that basically concludes our how we're going to build our request. Now, making the request is a different story. We have to get that session object going. So let's create a variable called session, and then call the OAuth2 session constructor. We don't need any of these doing it for the token, but I'm going to put them in there anyway. Actually, you know what? No, I'm going to show you how it works without passing anything. So, great. So we created an OAuth2 session object, but we need to find a way to put the token in there. And I dug around in the docs, and I mean, if somebody can go in comments and tell me what I missed, but I didn't find any way to like stick that token in here gracefully, or at least in a way that it worked. I mean, there is a token attribute, right? But just sticking it in there doesn't work. So, well, I don't know what that wrench is there. Oh, access token, fetch token. Anyways, what I did is I just put that token where it should be if you were to build that request by hand. So that token goes in your headers, right? And your headers is a dictionary. So we can pass it, or we can indicate a new key, which is going to be authorization, and then give it the token. The token is usually prepended, or is prepended with like the class or the type of token it is. So we're going to build an F string here, put the type, it's called a bearer token, and then we'll just pass our token value right here. So now our session has the authorization header in it. Now we just need to make that call. So when we make that call, we want to stuff it in a response variable so that we can take a look at it and print things and do things with it. So get our session out, do a simple get method. So this is making our get request. And it takes two parameters here. Our search endpoint URL. And then as an optional parameter, it's called params. And we're going to add our params. You know, let's just match the convention there because we do have more than one parameter there. We will save that off, and then I was just about ready to fire this off, but then we wouldn't see anything. So let's print something in the console here. Get a couple of print statements going. F string again. Call it status code. Let's see if we even got a good reply or a 200, right? For that, the response will have an attribute called code. Oh, status code. Look at that. And then we want to look at the meat of our response. And that attribute is called text. Okay, great. We are ready to test our quick and dirty. Just shove the token in there and see what we get. So we'll just keep everything here in VS Code. Open up a terminal. Check our directory. Yes, we're in the right spot. Then call Python 3 and then our simple run file. There we go. So there's no interaction from us at all because this token is pre-authenticated and whatever. We own it. It belongs to us. And our response text contains all sorts of stuff in here. We got the 200. And it looks like it's telling, okay, this is page 1. There's 20 results per page. Wow, there was quite a few results. But just to prove that this is not just hooey, let's just follow this link and see where it takes us. And there you go. ShutterStock result, one of the search results there. Wow, that's great. Okay, so we're going to go back and do it the long way, showing the outside client authorization. Okay, so now doing the example with the full OAuth 2 workflow, it's going to require a couple more pieces. So let me list those out first. We're going to need a redirect URL. This is from the beginning when we were registering our app. So when the user authenticates with Shutterstock, they will be redirected to our redirect URL with the auth code that we need to exchange for a token. Sorry if I'm repeating myself, but that's like a really big, important part of OAuth 2 workflow. That authorization link, we have to send the user to. Well, it's not a link. We'll just call it the URL for now. We need one of those. And then we need a place to exchange that code for a token. Token exchange URL. Let's think here. I think that's pretty good to start. So let me fill out this information here. Programs .github.io/website. There we go. Then the authorization URL and the token exchange URL, these will be found in the Shutterstock documentation. There is a section for authorization. All the stuff is in there. I have them here, so we don't have to go back and forth. We're just going to do a quick cut, copy, and paste. So authorization, and then token exchange URL. Great. Okay, we can move this stuff down further. We actually have to bring up our session. That was supposed to be a cut. Okay, so the session object, now we need to give it a couple of things to work correctly in this workflow. When we create the object, we want to pass it the client ID. And it also wants our redirect URI. Redirect URL. And now that that is set up, we can start doing the interactive part of the program. So we're going to print a link to the console that's going to simulate like the user clicking, register or whatever. And they're going to go auth, and it's going to send them to Shutterstock to authenticate. So we actually have to build that. It's not as easy as just pushing them to that URL. So the session object can help us with that. We'll call it auth link, and we'll set that equal to session dot authorization URL. That's the method. And in this, I believe, it just needs our authorization URL. That's all it needs. Oh, that's a little confusing, huh? Authorization, we'll just call it endpoint, so it's not as confusing. There we go. So that session is going to return us the actual clickable link. So let's print that to the screen. Print F string here. Say, please, not in caps, please go authenticate with ID server. We'll call it ShutterStock ID server. There we go. And we'll put the link here, auth link. And in fact, it actually returns a tuple, and we need the first element of that tuple. So we'll click that link. We'll get redirected to our site. Our URL will have appended to it some bunch of stuff on there, including something called a code. And then we're going to copy that, and then we need to dump it back into our program. So, what our program is going to do is basically it's going to parse that code and then make the exchange for the token. So when we come back with that and dump it into our program, we need to give it kind of like a facility to do that. So we will do a print, input. And we pass it a string here. We say paste the redirect URL with params here. And that input is set to our, what do we call that? The redirect, we'll call it response. And now that we have that response, we want to pass that to our session, and in particular, this fetch token method. Takes a little bit more than that, but we can start with that. Redirect response gets our redirect response. Here, they're also going to ask for our client ID again, and our client secret. And let's see, what else? Oh, and they need the token exchange URL. So we got that right here. Okay, so if that process completes successfully, our session will now be loaded with that token. So that's basically what we did with the headers before down here, but we're not going to do that this time. Basically going to be doing a version of that behind the scenes. And if that's successful, then we can set this stuff up and then make our request, and hopefully everything will go as planned. Okay, let's run this bad boy. Open up a terminal. As soon as this thing wants to cooperate, there we go. Check our present working directory. Good to go. Python 3 and our run file. Okay, so it prints out, please authenticate with the ShutterStock ID server. Gives us our link. That's this guy right here. Highlighting on line 17. And then you can see down here in our terminal, it's also waiting for us to dump in that response. which is this part of the code right here. So let's follow this link and authenticate. Wah, wah, wah. We got an error. I left this in here because this is some weird little bug that took me quite a while to figure out. Well, not quite a while, but it took me a minute to figure it out. Basically saying the URI that's registered with our app with ShutterStock is not matching what our URL link was doing. So I'm thinking, oh man, there's something wrong with the library. That auth link, it's not creating correctly. And I try to just literally copy it and say, okay, I'm putting this into my request. Why isn't it working? You know what it was? You got to go back to your app here. And I didn't show you this before, but there's the authentication details tab. There's also a details tab here. It shows you all your app callback URL. You can hit these three dots here and edit that. For whatever reason, it does not like anything on top of the top level there. So just take it out. I know this actually returns a 404, but they don't want anything in the back, even though I'm seeing here they have a little tooltip shows an example with something on top. But this was the fix. I remove this. I go ahead and save. We'll go back to VS Code and rerun our program. Let's clear this. Okay, hit this again. We're going to go back to authenticate. And we authenticate. Okay, now, so the point of this whole callback URL, if you go up top here, you can see there is the website URL, the callback URL. And then attached to it, they have these query parameters, code and state. That's pretty standard. So, I guess they could send anything, but this is what it's pretty standard, just code and state. So we're going to take everything, because that's how our program works. We copy it, and then we're going to return to VS Code, and we're going to dump it in here. It's going to go into this redirect response. The session is going to go ahead and fetch its token. It's going to install the token inside the session. We set up our request. How would you say, like our get request? Yeah, we're just setting it up. And then we're going to call that get method with the URL and our params with a session with that token. So let's go ahead and do that. Oh, we errored out. Please supply either code or authorization parameters here. What happened? Authorization response. That's what it's looking for. Okay. Authorization response. We can do that. Just a little naming hiccup there. I won't drag you through that again, so I'll leave the screen as is. We have to redirect again, and now, I mean, it's a separate call, so it's going to be a different code. Missing access token parameter. Well, that's 2 strikes. Let's see. So we pass it in. Fetch token. Token response. Validate token parameters. Missing tokens for missing access token parameter. Missing token. Missing access token. Well, I know this sounds a little weird, but I'm going to try this parameter here. Might need to include the client ID in the headers, and the way you do that is this. Set this parameter to true. Save. Give my last try. Again, I'm not going to take you along for that ride. Boring. And there we go. So that was the fix. That might be kind of helpful to see those little errors in case you run into them. Kind of figure out what you need to do. But here's our reply, and we did it. The client ID and secret authentication. Let's just try one of these things, make sure it's real. Okay, we'll select that one, and I will show you what we got. There we go. Great, so that concludes this simple API example. I hope that you found it entertaining or at least educational. And if you have any problems or questions or comments or suggestions for other APIs you'd like me to take a swing at, please feel free to leave a comment on the bottom. Likes and subs are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot, YouTube. See you around.